Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Gosh, I'm enjoying this fall. The extended weather we've had.
Warmth.
Today, nice, warm. And it seems that's been the trend. Our falls have been really nice.
I heard on Minnesota Public Radio, I think, that in Minnesota, the average temperature is about 7 degrees warmer than the average. The Septembers are just getting warmer and warmer and warmer. So we're coming into, it's almost like having 4 months of summer. We probably will have a quick fall, but it's nice.
You know, I suppose for fall color, the tree color, the extended warm periods isn't what some of the trees need to develop their most. Of course, we don't need frost because that kind of ends it right away as things start falling quicker, leaves start dropping. But to develop some of the reddest colors, they do need a little bit of cooler evenings. So the fall color might not be at its peak, but I think it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I was looking at the map. The DNR in Minnesota has a
what
map,
is that
pretty
saying?
Good map. We're at about 20 to 50% now where we are. And this is Thursday. So the show will come out in a couple of days. But what we're seeing is that, up north, it's starting to, nothing is so far past peak, which is kind of interesting.
It is.
Because we get to this late in September and sometimes some of the areas have kind of peaked, especially to the north. But, you've got next week, if you want to go out looking for color, I would say that'll be at that until probably maybe we're looking until mid-October. You have some time to go around.
And our tomatoes are still ripening.
I know.
Picked our first ripe watermelon. I don't know. It was kind of up and down this growing season. People mentioned too that their tomatoes were kind of slower to ripen, and our watermelons were slower to ripen. They like continued consistent heat. But anyway, the key point being I got a big one and wonderful watermelon. And for picking watermelons, of course, there's different things that you look at. That could be a whole podcast, how to harvest a ripe watermelon and know that it's ripe. But anyway, I cut into it and it was fully ripe. And that is so good because you don't want a big 20-pound watermelon, then pick it when it's not quite ripe. And there that went. So that's
got to be a great
delicious
feeling to have something that big and cut into it and know you got it at the right time, that it's just ready to go. That's got to be a good. Did you call all the kids over and just share it with the neighborhood and
do a video?
Yeah. What are you going to do with a 20-pound watermelon?
Well, I love watermelons so greatly.
Okay.
It's a seeded type. It does have seeds in, but that's okay. Some people debate that the seeded type are maybe actually a little more flavorful than the seedless types.
Okay.
So anyway, in addition to the watermelons, I'm still enjoying the color outside in the flower gardens. And, we do know that frost at some point is likely to come. And so that's why today I'm looking forward to talking about bringing some of these flowering plants indoors.
Yeah.
Such as geraniums, some of the other types of plants that we can bring indoors over winter and take back out during the next spring.
Yeah, all the things that you've put months and months and months of care into, it doesn't mean that they're done yet. You give them a different location, and you've got some tips for how to do that, tips for how to care for them over the winter. But first, you've got a question from a listener.
Yes, Sarah wrote in and says, I have a very large Carl Forester grass that I would like to divide to give part to our son for his new home. Would this be the time of year to do that, or should I wait until next spring after it's trimmed? Thanks for all your advice. Well, thank you, Sarah, for writing in. Now, Carl Forester is probably the most common ornamental grass. I oftentimes joke that that's the ornamental grass in front of every bank, dentist office, and credit union across the region, with good reason, because it is so hardy and dramatic. And I especially like them. Have you seen where they're used like in an entire row, almost like a hedge of them?
It's a great effect.
A great effect.
Especially now, they've really got, maybe color isn't necessarily the right word with them, but they've just having that kind of It's palish, kind of weedy color almost.
Exactly. And the seed heads are out now on most
so it's
of them.
a little fluffy on top,
Yep.
and when they sway, you get a little breeze. It's gorgeous.
Good fall color, good fall effect. And winter, you can leave the structure on all winter, so you've got something to look at. And swaying in the breeze, I always joke, in January, it kind of maybe a little more than swaying in the breeze,
Right.
when they're blowing in a blizzard, but they a great effect. So, let's talk just briefly about those. Okay, the above ground portion, the tops, are best left on over winter. There are little pollinating bees that can winter in those hollow stems, so good justification for leaving them on for our pollinators, and then cut them back early next spring before the new growth starts. If the new growth starts growing up in that haystack, it can be a real mess to try to remove that haystack. So they should be cut back in early spring, maybe end of March, early April, before any new growth starts. But the question that Sarah has is, okay, when can we divide it? You could divide it now in the fall. The preferred time, though, would be next spring. If you're able to, next spring, just as soon as a little growth is starting, okay, first of all, cut it back before any new growth starts. Then when there's a little growth starting, that would be the time to dig it and cut it into divisions, either with a sharp knife. The hori knife works great for that. The gardening knife, or a shovel, spade, cut down through. The reason for waiting until a little bit of growth starts, you're sure that you're getting a live clump kind of around the perimeter, because sometimes those Karl Forster grasses can die out in the center of the clump, and all the good part is around the perimeter.
Yeah, that will happen as they age. I mean,
Yes.
Especially if they get as...
And over time, they do need digging, dividing, resetting a live clump if that center has become dead. So, Sarah, if you are able, I would wait until next spring. There's probably not a good justification for doing it now. And so I would wait until next spring and then dig, divide, and get your son one of the divisions for his new home.
And really just enjoy it. Enjoy it now in the fall for as long as you can, for as long as it's there. I think, why deprive yourself of it now?
Good point.
Just enjoy it now, because otherwise you're just going to have kind of a hole there. And
good
and part
point.
of the thing. So yeah, enjoy it now. And Karl Forsters are great. That's another show we could do, is just the grasses.
We should, on ornamental grasses.
It's a great, the beauty of them is, especially like we were saying with Karl Forsters, you see them outside of every industrial building, bank, entrance, things like that. I know this as a relatively new gardener and, first time home buyer, they're easy to care for.
They are.
They are easy to care for, and they're durable. So there is a reason that they are used in these sites where maybe they're not going to get out and water it as much. People put them in rock gardens a lot. You see that too. But yeah, native grasses, decorative grasses.
Garden centers have a lot of selection too, beyond the Karl
nice.
Forster. So that's awesome. So thanks again, Sarah. And anyone else that would like to send me an email, either with success, questions, photos, Donald.Kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu.
I just said that, keep your Karl Forster, enjoy it all winter, enjoy it. The other thing we're going to talk about now is enjoying some plants that you may have had outdoors, but maybe you can overwinter. And one of the big ones there is geraniums. I know my mom has kept a geranium for years and years and years.
How many years? Do you know how long she's kept the same geranium? I
think it's at least 10 years.
Awesome.
And so for her, it's also just kind of, it's a challenge now just to do it. And not like a physical challenge, but she's like, okay, I'm going to do it. Just going to do it. Plus, she gets good green foliage in the winter.
Yes, and geraniums are just a classic container flower for summer. They're oftentimes blooming in spring when you either buy it or overwinter it, like we'll talk about. But geraniums start blooming in the spring, and they'll bloom all summer in pots and planters outdoors, and they're relatively easy to care for. And because they are so nice, this has been one of the favorite plants for people to overwinter indoors and then return back out in the springtime again. And my wife Mary and I winter about 100 of them. And I like to say I don't just winter them to get plants on the cheap, but you see, if I can save well, 100 of them, and they're about $5 each. That's $500. Wow.
Pretty good.
I
Yeah.
can use that budget for buying more apple trees or plum trees or some new perennials. So I don't probably reduce the amount I spend, but I just divert it to something else that I enjoy, other plants. So let's get into geranium overwintering. Now, gardeners have been wintering geraniums for years and years. A lot of people, my grandmother included, when they would winter their geraniums, they would do one of two things. She always kept some growing in a sunny window as a houseplant, and that works well, excellent. But she would also dig some up, shake all the dirt off the roots, and hang them up down in their root cellar, where they stored the potatoes and the onions and the pumpkins and everything else. Well, those root cellars were cool and damp. I think it had a dirt floor, actually. And, but, root cellars in houses are kind of a thing of the past.
Yeah.
We don't have that damp area to hang the geranium up by the roots and then next spring have it live. So in modern houses, that can be really challenging, is finding the spot to do that. See, geraniums are capable of going kind of semi-dormant. So what some people do if they kind of want to have their geranium go semi-dormant is they'll move the pots into maybe a garage that doesn't get real cold but stays kind of coolish, maybe 40 degrees or so. Maybe they've got a basement room that stays kind of cool. Some people put it kind of by a basement window, and those geraniums will go kind of semi-dormant and then next spring. And that can work. It's worked for people that have kind of developed that. But the technique that I'm going to mention, and that it's worked very well for us, and other people that have tried this have had about a 100% success rate. So very little goes wrong with this method. Okay.
Now I got to hear it.
Yes. Okay. So picture this. Okay, we've got all these pots of geraniums. I don't know, we've got probably, I think, about 25 big pots of geraniums. Okay, and they differ in size. Some of the pots have 2 geraniums in. Other of the bigger pots have 5 geraniums in. And so we don't try to take that entire big pot indoors to overwinter. The idea is to lift each of these geraniums individually out of their outdoor containers, and then we're going to pot them up, and we're going to keep them growing all winter long, okay, instead of having them go semi-dormant. So this time of year before frost, I haven't done it yet because there's no frost in the forecast. So before frost, when they're forecasting a frost, we might want to do it a few days ahead. You see, some years I've been out with a flashlight, or Mary's been holding the flashlight, and I'm doing this because there's a frost forecast in a few hours. Okay, so do it a few days ahead, and I'm going to write that on my own calendar. Okay, so a few days before frost, go out to your big planters of geraniums and dig your hands down in the pots and lift out each geranium. Okay, so we're going to individualize each of the geraniums. Then, now here's the part that some people wince at, but it works well. Now the geraniums over the course of summer, maybe they're 12 inches high, 15 inches high. Take your pruning shears and cut the tops all the way back to about 2 inches above the root system.
Wow.
Okay, so we're lifting the plants out so the roots don't have any soil around, and cut them back to about 2 inches above soil level. Get rid of all the old crunchy leaves that have fallen down, any yellowing leaves, and oftentimes there will be no leaves left on those bare stems. Then we take each of those geraniums and pot them up into a 4.5 or 5-inch diameter pot. Now that's the size of pot that you bought geraniums at the garden center. So that's a common size pot that they sell geraniums at in the springtime. So 4.5, 5-inch pot or so. And then with a good quality potting mix, something well drained with lots of peat and perlite and good things in it, pot each one up into an individual pot. For that operation, I'll oftentimes use a wheelbarrow. I do this outside because a lot less mess. So I dump the potting mix in the wheelbarrow, and I have all my pots there, and I've cut all these geraniums back, these 100 geraniums back, And then I grab a pot, put a little bit of potting mix down in the bottom, put that basically a bare root geranium down in, fill in with the potting mix, tap it a little on my the bottom of my hand. I don't like to squish the potting mix down in to pack it because that squishes all the air out. Instead, I tap it on a table to settle it, or whack it on the bottom of the pot with your hand a little, just so the soil the mix settles down around the geranium plant. Okay, and then a reason for potting them back up in a 4.5 inch or 5 inch pot, you can get a lot of geraniums in a relatively small space. And these are going to fit down in our basement under our lights. Okay, so I've got them all potted up. And of course, water them thoroughly. And you can put the pots right next to each other, because at this point, the geraniums are still, quite small. You've cut them back. And then I move them down into the basement under our light system. I've got some kind of benches, and I have LED lights. They aren't plant type lights, just regular LED lights work quite beautifully for geraniums. And then I put the potted geraniums under the lights, with the lights only 2 to 3 inches above the geraniums, so that the geraniums are getting good light. And in about 2 to 3 weeks, those bare stems are bursting forth with new little leaves.
Okay.
And they just start growing and growing and growing. And so all winter long, you're growing these geraniums just like a little greenhouse down in our basement. You could do it in a laundry room or something. Even if you don't want to do 100 geraniums, well, maybe it's a dozen geraniums. They would fit in a relatively small space under a relatively small light. And then, so during the winter, you water them as the soil dries. Now, geraniums like a little on the dry side, so maybe the watering, especially if your basement runs a little cool like ours does, maybe it's every 2 weeks or so to water them, to make sure that they don't stay overly wet. But the geraniums, the leaves come out, maybe give them fertilizer once a month or so, and pretty soon you've got a nice little bushy, well-branched geranium. So they will grow all winter, and then around maybe January, February, they'll even start blossoming. So it's beautiful. Now, if you don't want to put them under lights, you could put them in a sunny window. That would work too. A full sun window is best. And it's fun to see the blossoms in January, early February. And then in March, because they've grown so well all winter, in March, you trim them back again. You remove the flowers, the flower buds, maybe trim them up, not as severely as you did in the fall here when you pot them up, but trim them back a little bit. Just get rid of some of the whippy winter type growth and give them a little bit of haircut. Start fertilizing maybe every couple of weeks. And by May, you have a greenhouse quality geranium. And that then you plant out after danger of frost, back out into your containers again. And we have wintered these same geraniums for probably 7 years. Now, theoretically, you could keep wintering those same geraniums for many, many years. You say your mom has wintered a geranium
maybe 7 to
for
10
many years. I met a lady in Grand Forks who had wintered the same geraniums for 40 years.
Wow.
And so they're capable of wintering quite a while. Now, okay, you might wonder, well, why in the fall here? Why do we cut it back like that? Okay, if it's 12 inches, can't I just pot it up and keep that 12 inches? Well, they tend to become a little woody, a little leggy, and by cutting them back severely, you're forcing fresh new growth that's better able to bloom. So now, how long am I going to be able to keep these same 100 geraniums going? Over time, that lower part starts getting kind of woody, grayish, almost woody. And so every so often, maybe every few years, I like to take geranium cuttings excuse me. I like to take some geranium cuttings to start a fresh batch. So every year I'll kind of cycle out maybe the oldest of that 100 and include some new ones. And so maybe we could take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll mention the system for starting some fresh cuttings of geraniums.
All right, that sounds really good. We'll be back in a minute.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
All right, we're back, and this week we're talking about overwintering some of your plants that you've had outside, bring them inside. And we've been talking about geraniums, and you had a tried and true method for how to pull the plant up, how to get it in shape, bring it inside, care for it over winter. But now you're going to talk about what to do if some of these plants are a little older and you need to kind of move on, how to take cuttings to start new plants.
Yeah, every so often, it's probably a wise idea with geraniums to get some new ones starting and maybe toss out the oldest, woodiest ones that maybe aren't performing as well. And so remember I mentioned that, when a person is lifting these geraniums out of the outside containers, you cut them back severely. Well, the part that you cut back, we can save some of that part and root as cuttings. So the outer tips, the kind of the freshest green growth on those, can be rooted. Now, I know my mom used to just root geraniums in a glass of water, and that would work. But an even better way, with less chance of rotting, is to root them in a potting mix, a good high-quality potting mix. Or maybe add a little vermiculite or perlite or a little sand, maybe even just peat moss. And you can root those in. But high-quality potting mix works well. So from those tips of the geraniums, and the preferred cutting is maybe about 3 inches long, and then you take off the lower leaves and insert the bottom of that cutting down in some potting mix. What I use are recycled 4-packs that I bought at the garden center, little 4-packs. Fill those up with your good quality potting mix and insert the geranium cutting down into those, and keep them a little bit moist but not too wet. And in about 3 weeks, they'll be rooted.
So when you talk about that you put those in the 4-pack, why not put those in the, like you were talking about the original pots with the 4-inch pots that you normally would put your geranium when you lift it out, roots and all, cut it back and put it in? Why do you want 2 different pots to basically kind of the same process where you're starting something over from a relatively new beginning?
Sure. So why start it in a cutting in a 4-pack? Why not just start it in the larger pot?
Yeah, why put it in something so small? Yeah.
And the good reason, those bigger pots are for grown-up plants.
Okay.
They're ones that are already well rooted. It's interesting. Plants seem to need a comfort level. They like their roots to fill up a pot, and it gives them a sense of comfort or security. If a too small of a plant or cutting is put in too large of a pot, it just kind of wallows in that. I guess kind of like a security blanket for a baby.
Okay.
So anyway, cuttings root better if they're in a smaller cell rather than a big pot. Otherwise, they kind of tend to wallow in too much. Not that it can't work, but it does work better to get them to root and then move them up to the grown-up pot.
But you don't want to put them
after they're rooted.
You don't want, like we have seed trays now for when we start our seed germinations. You probably don't want to put it in something too small then, do you?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's why the 4-packs seem to work quite well. So then after 3 weeks or so, once you've determined that they've rooted, then you can bounce them up to the big pot, the 4.5 to 5 inch, and then grow them over winter. And by spring, they should be a pretty sizable plant, almost like what you would buy in a garden center.
When you have something from a new clip or from a clipping, and you're basically starting a new plant, do you cut it back then in March again, like you would the other rooted plant, the one that was the actual fully mature plant?
You do.
Okay.
That cutting back, or in gardening terms, oftentimes they call it pinching back. That pinching back does encourage side branching.
Okay.
So that rather than just one kind of somewhat leggy stalk, you're pinching it back, cutting it back, and that encourages the side branching. So you get that nice, full, well-branched base that's capable of greater bloom.
All right. Hey, just a couple of questions going back to your process there, the tried and true process. You talk about lifting out the geranium in fall and then putting it in the pot and then cutting it back. Why can't you cut it back so you're not lifting out a whole big thing? Could you cut it back first and then lift it out?
I believe you could.
Okay. This is just the way that you're
sure.
Okay, sure. I was just wondering if there is a difference, that if it would be too much of a shock to cut it and then pull it out, but okay. So I just wanted to check on that.
Yeah, you could really cut them back before you lift them out.
And they're not that heavy.
Yeah, so I guess I have no reason for why I just lift them up out of the thing and then cut them back.
And then the other thing you were talking about, when you put them under your lights, you have your lights.
I suppose I could have said, because that's the way I've always done it.
That's, that is surprisingly the way I do things. Yeah, I shouldn't say surprisingly.
I've always done it that way. That's the reason.
Yeah, I've always done it this way. Why do I need to change? You talked about when you got the plants and you've got them under the lights, you say about 2 inches above. So do you constantly go down and readjust those lights as the plant grows to raise those lights? So that they're always the 2 inches above?
Definitely. And that's why I've got the lights suspended from the rafters by chains, on chains. So I can, as they grow, I can keep them. An alternative would be, if you have stationary lights, you can put something under the geranium so that they're closer, and then as something, blocks or trays or something underneath the geranium pots. And then as the geraniums grow, then you would reduce what you have underneath the pot so that they're at the appropriate level. But on an adjustable chain works really well.
Yeah. So when you get, 100, you do this 100 times with about 100 geraniums. That's impressive.
Yeah, an assembly line. Yes, works well.
That's pretty great. Well, should we take another quick break and we come back more about overwintering some other plants?
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back and we're talking about overwintering some of your favorite plants. We just talked about Don's tried and true, fail-proof method for overwintering geraniums, as well as getting clippings from them and starting new plants. Let's talk about some other plants. What else can we overwinter? What are some good ones to overwinter?
Have you ever tried either growing or overwintering a mandevilla?
No, I've never. No.
And of course, those are such a beautiful kind of a tropical vining type with great big kind of trumpet-like flowers, white, pink, red. There's also related called Dipladenia, and the botanists have kind of gone back and forth, mandevilla, Dipladenia, but they kind of look the same. And I think one probably vines more than the other. Also, we could group into the same tropical native hibiscus. The potted type hibiscus. There's also a perennial flower type hibiscus, but this one is kind of the tropical. They tend to make kind of little woody like trees that people enjoy on their patio as a patio pot, then bring them on in. So we could kind of group these all together in kind of that tropical native. If we left them outside, of course, they'd freeze.
Yeah.
And so people enjoy bringing them in. I've enjoyed bringing our mandevilla in for quite a few years. Now, one reason why it's fun to bring these in, because if you grow them in a sunny window, or they could be grown under lights, but these plants tend to be bigger, than a geranium. So in front of a patio door that gets good sunny window, or a larger picture type window that gets good sun, they're fun because they will bloom during the winter time. And man, it's fun to have some tropical blooms in January blooming in a window. I've had people send me photos of their hibiscus or mandevilla blooming in January. You can see out their patio door where there's snow drifts outside, and here they've got tropical blooms indoors. So it's uplifting. And so, okay, what do we do with these? So about this time of year, it's important that we wash them off good before we bring them in, because insects like to tag along. Geraniums are not as insect prone as these others. Geraniums have that kind of a very aromatic leaf, and it seems insects are less prone to attack geraniums. So I find I don't need to deal with that the way I do these other tropicals. But aphids and spider mites love hibiscus and mandevilla, and so a good washing off outdoors, upper, lower parts of the leaf to dislodge anything that is there, and keep an eye over winter. So when you bring these in, some people will add systemic houseplant granules to the soil so that it kind of internally will take care of the insects. So important though, when you bring these in this time of year, is to trim them back. Usually they're so massive, and so it's just too much really to bring in and overwinter. And so cutting back, I don't know, maybe by half of whatever is there, cut back half or more. All of these take pruning well, so you can cut them back to whatever is a manageable size for you. And pretty soon indoors, within a few weeks in a sunny window, they're going to start putting out new growth already. Fertilize maybe once a month or so at least to give them some nutrition. And then in March again, just like we cut back the geraniums in March with these plants, we trim them back again. See, they'll put out some really good growth over winter, but the growth is usually a little more spindly than their summer growth under highlight. And so about March, the whippy growth that they may be developed, trim that back again to about the point that you trimmed it back in fall on these. And then, okay, you do that first part of March. They've got March and April. By May, and the days are getting longer during those months, so the window that they're in is starting to get more intense light. That's why when you trim them back in March, they start a little more compact, robust growth in that window because the days are getting longer, the sun's getting more intense. And so by May, you've got a nice, well-branched plant that you can take back out onto your patio.
Nice.
And it really, really does work well. Again, it's not just about getting them on the cheap, but you can buy a hydrangea shrub with the money you saved from not having to buy another mandevilla.
Well, and we talk about this so often too, is that one of the biggest obstacles, hurdles that gardeners face is patience. And yes. Especially once it's nice enough to be outside, wouldn't you like there to be things that are fully grown and color there? And this is a good way to get that. This is a good way to have some of that, to have something around you that's bright, that's colorful, that's fully grown, that has some size while you're waiting for your
plus you get your gardening fix all winter long.
Yes.
It's interesting. I actually like in the upper Midwest here, I like these seasons we have. I like in the winter being able to shut down what we have outside. It gives you a break. It makes you long for that again the next spring. But I don't want to totally give up gardening in the wintertime. I want to see things like geraniums growing and mandevilla growing, and I want to start some seeds. So it's a different type of labor. But, these things, wintering these things gives me my gardening fix during the wintertime.
Yeah, it's a good way to keep your hands in the dirt.
It is.
Oh, what about some other ones that we can do?
Oh, coleus. Gosh, coleus. You could dig up the plant of coleus, but they root so easily, even in a glass of water. You could take coleus cuttings and root some of those and grow coleus.
But you've said that in the past, I think you've said that rooting in a glass of water is not as effective as rooting in potting soil, right?
You got it, John. And here's the reason for that. Now, roots that develop in water, cuttings that you put in a glass of water and the roots that form, they are adjusted to water. They're adjusted to growing in water. And then when you go to pot them up, those roots have an adjustment. They have to adjust from coping in water to all of a sudden they have to adapt to soil. So if you just plain root them in potting mix or a media like that, they're already accustomed to growing in that, and the transplant shock is less. Also, cuttings that develop in a potting mix tend to be more fibrous, better branched. In water, roots that form in water tend to be maybe a little more straggly, and again, it can certainly be done. But yeah, why not root them in a potting mix? So coleus, I've noticed that have less of a transplant shock if you just root the cuttings in a potting mix instead of in water.
So coleus in sweet potato vine, another one you said?
Sweet potato vine is another one. Quite easy to overwinter. You can dig those up. Have you grown those in pots and planters, sweet potato vine?
We have a lot of coleus and sweet potato vines.
They are so vigorous, the sweet potato vine. Have you ever, when you've dug it up, maybe taken it out of the planter, found the big sweet potato underneath?
We found the tuber, yeah. Yes. Are those edible? I don't know.
That's a common question too. Yeah. Can we eat those? The sweet potato vine, the ornamental one, is the same genus and species as the edible sweet potato. And so they are edible, but they're not palatable.
Okay.
I actually sampled one, and they're really bitter. Okay. The one that we eat, the sweet potato, those were developed to be sweet. Okay. These others are edible, but not very sweet. And so a number of us, but and of course I investigated that before I ate it.
Okay, so you weren't biting into poison.
Exactly. I made sure that but anyway, they just it's interesting when you dig them up though. So they can be grown from cuttings. You could start cuttings, fresh plants of cuttings, or you can dig up the plant. But sometimes they grow so vigorously that they've got such an underground system that it would be kind of hard to pot that up. So on those, I favor just starting a new cutting of sweet potato vine. Let's see, there are other things too. Begonias, you could bring those in. Snowstorm bacopa, that's a pretty little plant that can be brought in as well. And sometimes it takes a little bit of experience to see just exactly how to get those to grow over winter. Sometimes I've dug up the snowstorm bacopa, the little plant, cut it back, potted it up, and it didn't always grow for me during the winter. So sometimes you have to hit kind of the right magic formula for these, but you have nothing to lose with many of these things. You have nothing to lose trying to overwinter them.
The begonia is interesting. We grow like a Rex begonia. We put that in our planters because that seems to pair well with the coleus.
Yeah, they're pretty. And, have you tried overwintering? Some people have had good success wintering those.
Is that just pulling up the whole plant?
Exactly. Because, of course, when these things are in a combination planter, you just can't tote the whole big combination planter in and try to deal with it. So, yes, the way to do it would be to dig out that Rex begonia, pot it up in a manageable little-sized pot, and grow it on sunny window or under light. People have had fair success with the Rex-type begonia.
And for that one, you wouldn't really want to cut it back, would you? Because it's it's not a stem system like
exactly.
a
They kind of tend to come, the leaves tend to come out of one central crown rather than a lot of stems that you can, upward growing stems like a geranium that you can cut back. But so that you'd want to just kind of dig up that hole and they kind of all come out of a crown. So there would be less dramatic cutback on those, other than getting rid of some of the dried or yellowed leaves.
Interesting. I think that's what
I'm going to try to do over the winter.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll expect updates.
Okay. Well, this has been great. This is fun. And
Good discussion.
I love the idea of the geraniums. We have a couple of hardy geraniums, but I don't think
sure, the outdoor perennial type geraniums.
And those are nice. But now thinking about this, okay, well, this would be kind of a fun thing to do. And when you were talking about that how you can even get color in late January and February, hey, there's your Valentine's Day flower. If you're growing that, bring those upstairs, bring them out of the basement, put them on the dining room table. You've got a nice little bit of color
Mary
there.
Might not be quite as enchanted with my geranium as she would a dozen roses, but it's worth a try.
Right. But hey, for some of us,
yes,
yeah, it's a good.
Now, for me, a blooming geranium is more valuable than a dozen roses.
Yes, exactly. Anybody can go out and buy a blooming geranium, but only a person who cares for something for a period of time, has shown the dedication and devotion. That is maybe we should lobby for geraniums
as being the
as
Valentine's
Day. Yes, for gardeners at least. Well, Don, thanks a lot. This has been a lot of fun. And if people have more questions about overwintering plants or anything, like you said earlier, show off their successes, their failures, have questions about anything, what's the best way to reach you?
Keep the cards and letters and emails coming. Donald.Kinsler, KINZLER @ndsu.edu. And thank you, John. Thanks, everyone, for listening.